There's only so many times I can say this, but the situation with Davis just keeps getting worse. With this new update, honestly, there's only one question left. Why is this man not in jail yet? Why is the LAPD dragging their feet? How do we still not have enough to lock David up? Because at this point, it's pretty clear. It's clear who killed Celeste, and it's clear what the plan for Celeste was from the very beginning. And the longer this drags on, the more suspicious it gets that no one has been held accountable yet.
DA, clearly she thinks David did this, but there were more than one or more than two people who had some knowledge of it. A circle around David knew various things. The DA is closing in on somebody, and I believe two people who are very close to David, the singer who is a suspect in the murder of Celeste Rivas.
Yeah, I have no hope whatsoever in this investigation. We've been hearing that DA is on his tail since about week 2. And what's happened since week 2? David has been around the world. David has been chilling. David has managed to turn over all his properties to his mother names. David has had ample time to prepare his defense. So we have no faith in this whatsoever. LAPD is a freaking joke. Now, there's an update on this case. Now, the update itself just makes me realize why I don't have no faith in LAPD whatsoever. Because this update, if it was anywhere else, is pretty damaging and will get that person in cuffs. But because it's LAPD and they're incompetent nincompoops, nothing is going to happen to David whatsoever.
The private investigator Steve, who was hired by the homeowner, revealed something important a while back. He said that when he was first brought in, it was after the LAPD had already raided the house. When Steve arrived, he found what he described as a treasure trove of evidence. Information that LAPD saw during their raid but never took. According to him, LAPD knew these items existed. They documented them, they took photos, but they never seized them as evidence. And for a long time, no one could understand why. Now, it looks like we finally have the answer. And the shocking part is, this information didn't come from LAPD or the DA. It came from the private investigator himself. Why? Because instead of going after David, LAPD started going after him. They subpoenaed him. They tried to hold him in contempt of court. They even attempted to jail him, simply for updating the public. They did the same thing to the medical examiner's office, an office that's literally supposed to provide transparency to the public. They silenced them. And now they're trying to silence the private investigator who's been pushing to get David locked up. So Steve finally said, enough. If they were going to come after him, he decided to release the information himself. And now we know exactly what LAPD chose not to take. Yes, search warrants have limits, but they absolutely could have gone back, gotten another warrant, and seized what many would consider damning evidence in the David case. From my perspective, that choice says a lot. In a post on X, formerly Twitter, the private investigator Steve clarified his previous statements. He wrote that his words had been misquoted by some people. What he actually said was that certain items found at the Doheny address were items you would expect to see on a farm, not at a private home in the Hollywood Hills. For context, the Doheny address is the same location where the Tesla was found. It is also Davis's primary residence in Los Angeles. One of the items discovered at that home was a burn cage incinerator. That immediately raises a serious question. Why would a burn cage be located at a private residential property? During the LAPD search of the home, officers found this burn cage at a location connected to a vehicle where a deceased body was later discovered, and yet they chose not to seize it as evidence. The incinerator in question was advertised to burn at 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. For reference, human cremations are typically performed at around 1,400 degrees. An incinerator like this is not legal to operate within city limits and serves no legitimate purpose at a residential property in the Hollywood Hills. Some have suggested the burn cage was meant to be a prop for a music video. If that were true, it raises obvious questions. Why would a 55-pound industrial burn cage be delivered to a private residence instead of a prop house or production studio? Why would it be ordered before leaving for an extended world tour? And why was it never used in any video production? It's also important to note that there were additional items at the residence that could potentially be used in conjunction with the burn cage. What those items were remains unknown. That's because LAPD has restricted the investigator from discussing further details. To be clear, the burn cage was never used. It was still new and inside the box. However, given that Celeste Hernandez's remains were ultimately found in the trunk of the Tesla, the presence of an incinerator at the same residence raises serious questions about intent. The burn cage was not seized during the search warrant, and because it was never used, authorities appear to have determined it was not relevant to any criminal investigation. Even if not criminal on its own, it remains critical context. One final detail, the burn cage and related items were delivered to the residence under a false name. Although the deliveries were accepted at the property, there was no name directly tying the shipment to David. Photographs provided by the investigators show the burn cage still sealed in its original packaging. This is what it looked like. The Law and Crime YouTube channel did an interview with a detective and a law enforcement instructor, whatever that means. And even he seems pretty bewildered and confused as to why the burn cage was not an interest to LAPD. He would explain that even though the search warrant was not for the burn cage and it was very specific, they could have very easily gone back and gotten a piggyback warrant the same day and come back and gotten the burn cage. So them choosing not to get the burn cage after about 3 months is kind of, confusing and incompetent.
I cannot think of a legitimate, innocent reason why a burn cage would be received at a private residence, why it would be ordered under a false name. I also, frankly,
let's
can't
actually
understand.
Just start there. Keep your thought.
Okay.
The only thing I would say is about a false name, if he's a celebrity, he doesn't want people knowing that he's staying there. Thoughts?
Fair enough, but if he's got a bunch of people that he's working with because he intends to use this as part of a concert tour, as part of a video, he's got a whole staff of people that can order something for him. I don't understand why he would need to do it under an assumed name. But your point is well taken. That could be an innocent explanation. But again, to Steve's points, if that is indeed the intent for this item, why is it delivered to a private residence? Why is it not with him on tour? Why is it not taken to some location to be used for some kind of a video? That said, I also can't think of a good reason why LAPD didn't seize this item. I mean, if you're conducting an investigation into a body found in the trunk of a car, one of your working theories has got to be that this body was placed there in order to move it from the scene where the death occurred and then transport it to some third location to conceal it or dispose of it.
Isn't it obvious that there are two separate crimes being investigated at the same time? First, there's the homicide investigation. Authorities are now clearly moving away from the idea that Celeste simply overdosed and somehow moved herself into the token of a Tesla, which never made sense in the first place. They are finally acknowledging that Celeste was likely murdered. But even if, for some reason, murder could not be proven in court, there is still a second category of crimes being investigated. That includes abuse of a corpse and desecration of human remains. Those are serious felony offenses on their own. And here's where the burn cage becomes critical. Because once you find out who ordered the burn cage, you're likely much closer to identifying who was involved. The person who ordered it is either David himself or someone actively helping David. And if someone was helping David, then that person is very likely the same person who moved the body, handled the body, or attempted to conceal or destroy evidence. That alone could be enough to bring charges. And once charges are brought, that person could be pressured to turn on David. That's basic investigative logic. So if law enforcement shows no interest in the burn cage, no interest in who ordered it, no interest in the fake name used, no interest in why it was ordered, then what exactly are they doing? Because even if the burn cage wasn't ordered in David's name, investigators could still trace who used that fake name, who paid for it, and who accepted delivery. That's exactly why the burn cage should have been seized and logged into evidence. Taking a photo is not the same thing as taking possession. If you don't physically have the burn cage, then later someone can claim it was a prop or that it was something else entirely. Without the actual item in evidence, that argument becomes harder to disprove. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but common sense says you preserve every piece of physical evidence, especially when you're dealing with a case where suspects are actively trying to hide information. And that's the final piece that makes this even more concerning. David and people around him have been actively working to conceal evidence, erase digital footprints, and remove traces in real time. When you're dealing with that level of behavior, failing to secure physical evidence isn't just a mistake, it's dangerous. A key example of why evidence matters is a guy known online as Neil, who is reportedly close to David. People started noticing that Neil has been scrubbing his social media. Entire chunks of posts are gone, photos deleted, timelines with noticeable gaps. And the obvious question is, why? When someone starts removing large portions of their online history during an active investigation, that alone raises questions, especially when older photos previously showed him around Celeste at social gatherings. According to screenshots that circulated online before being removed, Neil, an adult, appeared at events where Celeste was present while she was still very young. That naturally leads people to ask, why were adults socializing with a minor? Where were the guardians? Who knew what and when? This matters because Neil was reportedly around David frequently, described by some as part of his inner circle. If people close to David are now actively deleting content, hiding associations, and cleaning timelines, that behavior should concern investigators. When individuals are proactively concealing information, law enforcement should be equally proactive in preserving anything that could be evidence, because you don't get to decide what's important after it disappears. Neil later returned to Instagram and tried to explain the deletions, saying he didn't want to be judged by online speculation and that he would speak when ready. But here's the issue. In situations involving a missing or deceased minor, clarity matters more than silence. If someone had proximity to both David and Celeste, they may hold information about when she was last seen, who she was with, or why she suddenly disappeared. Those are not rumors, those are factual questions. And with no statute of limitations on homicide, time doesn't protect anyone. If the truth is known, the responsible thing is to come forward, because silence, deletion, and avoidance don't look like innocence. They look like fear.
If you're looking at the possibility that somebody is trying to dispose of a body, and you search the residence of a person of interest in that case, and you find what is essentially a home crematorium, why don't you take that? I know that when you're serving a search warrant, you can only seize the things that the court authorized you to seize and that you told the court you expected to find there. I'm sure nobody expected to find this item there. But what you do in a search warrant when you find something evidentiary that was unexpected is you write what's called a piggyback warrant. It's a simple addendum where you say, hey, judge, while serving that search warrant that you issued, we found this other thing. We think it's evidence. We'd like to seize that too. It's a typical one-page addendum that's tacked onto your warrant. I've never seen a judge not sign one of those, and I don't know why that wasn't done in this case.
At this point, I'm done being optimistic. If you honestly believe this case is going to be solved anytime soon, I wish I could share that confidence, but I can't. From the outside looking in, it feels like this investigation has been mishandled at almost every turn. Critical evidence overlooked, key questions left unanswered, and way too much time wasted. That doesn't sit right. What we can say is this: David's behavior raises serious red flags. Suspicious actions, suspicious associations, suspicious silence. And when you combine all of that with delays and inconsistencies, it naturally makes people question how this case is being handled. But that's just my take. I want to hear from you. What do you think about how law enforcement has handled this investigation so far? Do you still trust the process, or do you think something's gone wrong? Let me know in the comments. And if you're still watching and want to dig deeper into why cases like this keep slipping through the cracks, click the video on your screen right now. I'll see you there. I'm out.